Hello, everybody. Yes, we are back in the big marathon 3000 with Reverend Doctor Trevor Adams from UK with wonderful stories, wonderful ideas, and not only ideas, something we can do really. Dear Dr. Trevor, do you would like to present yourself first, and then we will go with your amazing life?
Yeah, I'm Reverend
Please.
Doctor Trevor. Reverend Doctor Trevor Adams. Live in England. I work with people within education, from children right up to adults, and it's a passion that I have to see people develop within the education system and outside of the education system as well. And it's
Yeah.
so good to be. It's so good to be here having this conversation with you as well, Naomi.
No, thank you for your time and for sharing. Can we know about your early childhood? Because I understand you were born in Guyana, right?
Guyana, yes, yes,
Guyana,
yes,
English Guyana.
yes. British Guyana. That's where I
British,
was born.
British.
British Guyana. That's now just Guyana,
Would you
South
like to tell
America.
us about that and about your grandmother? How was your first principles in life? How were you
Yeah,
raised?
my my grandmother was my first main educator. She was my first main teacher. I was left with my grandmother at the age of 6 months when my
Wow,
parents
wow, wow.
when my parents left to migrate to England for a better life. And that was the experiences of so many of us. We were left with our grandparents to look after us whilst our parents went to the UK, United Kingdom. But I was left with my grandmother for the first 7 years of my life. So she was the one who laid the foundation for me. I started schooling at about age 3, was when I started schooling. And there's not a lot that I can remember. There are things I can remember, but some of the things that I cannot remember, my cousin, who's older than me, she has explained to me what I was like as a child. And she said, by the age of 4 or 5, you can read and write. And she said, your grandmother did not encourage you to go outside and play a lot. She encouraged you to study, study and study. And the teacher used to say to my grandmother, you have a very bright grandson. You have a very, very bright grandson. And my cousin said to me that my grandmother would say to me, I am so proud of you, my grandson. I'm so proud of you. And so my grandmother was very, very disciplined. We had to go to church on a Sunday morning before eating anything, before any breakfast, the church, and then home, and then we had breakfast. And then she used to send us to church again in the afternoon. But for her, education, 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 education was very, very important. And I was fortunate because my parents sent money back to Guyana for me to start my education early. So I'm grateful for my grandmother and my parents in giving me that foundation, because that foundation was going to be tested in the years ahead. And I will tell you a bit more about that.
Yeah, what happened when you, because then you arrived to the UK, right? At 7 years old.
Well, yes, at
And
7
the
years
story
old.
changed a little bit. What happened?
Well, at 7 years old, Naomi, I was put onto a plane by myself. No family,
What?
no friends, no, just a little case. I was put onto a plane. I was taken away from my grandmother and put onto a plane to be sent to England to join my parents. Now, when I came to England, I was sent to school, and at the time, England was not very friendly to people coming from Guyana and the Caribbean. Was not very, very, was very discriminatory. And so when I entered into the education system, remember that I could read, I could write, I was advanced. Myself and some of the other children, we were put into these special educational classes. They were put into special education classes, whereby we had to learn things which we had learned before. Because one of the things was that we had a slightly different accent. Yes, we came from British Guyana, and yes, we were British, but we had an accent. And so we were put into these special educational classes. We were taken out of our main classes and put into these special education classes. As a result, that pushed our education backwards. It pushed my education backwards. But my parents saw that my education was going downwards. And so what my father did, a father who is a science teacher, what he did at the time was to give us lessons at home. He taught us himself. He gave us lessons at home. And he used to make sure that we have books. Not so much toys and things like that. It was books, always books. This is the reason why, as you can see behind you.
I can see behind you.
I have a love of books. I love books. I always love books. And so we came home from school, had something to eat, and then we had to go with my father and sit down and have our lessons. And my father used to teach other children, so we had to go with him in the car to their homes. And whilst he was teaching them, he was also teaching us. But my father left us when I was about age 11.
Oh.
And that was very, very difficult, very, very hard. And so my education dropped because I lost focus, lost concentration, as many children do who find themselves in a situation where parents separate. And I struggled within the school. Now, the school has a system whereby they either put you onto the higher level paper or the lower level paper. And most of us who came from Guyana or the Caribbean, we were put onto the lower examination route, the lower examination pathway. And another thing as well, Naomi, was that many of us who came from Guyana or from the Caribbean, some children were sent to schools called schools for the educationally subnormal. Schools for the
I hate this word. It's terrible.
Yeah, it's for schools for educationally subnormal. So there were children who had that experience as part of their growing up, as part of their development. But the system didn't cater for our needs. The system was such that we were being educated for the factories. We were being educated for the menial jobs.
It was a Windrush generation.
The Windrush generation. The children, yes.
So that was exactly the time where you arrived.
That's right. So if you imagine that after the Second World War, Britain needed to rebuild itself, it sent out recruiters to the Caribbean.
So they were just interested in labor, cheap labor, let's say.
That's right. That's right. To help the country rebuild.
That was the only concern they had, and
that's right.
Horrible, I think.
So the main focus was our parents coming over to work, but of course, parents having children and being separated from your children, you would want your children to come and join you. And Britain was seen as a mother country, so lots of parents came to England and they brought their children with them. And we were put into the education system that was not set up for us. It did not cater for us. It did not respond to our needs. And many of us were reported as being backward, being dull, being unresponsive, being disengaged. But no one took into consideration the trauma that we felt from being uprooted from our country of origin, placed into a very strange environment. The place was cold, the people were cold, and trying to make sense of.
It's still cold in England.
It's still very cold. It's still very cold.
And it's the same issues with all the refugee children. And now we have millions of them in Europe.
Yes.
The same
Yes.
situation. They just
Yes.
pulled out and put in a new context of culture with no consideration for emotional issues, post-trauma issues, feelings. We are all human beings.
Very, very much so. And, and in some cases, the children have to learn a new language,
Yeah,
a new culture, a new way of life. And oftentimes nothing is said. So they've been uprooted
uprooted.
from their place, but nothing is said to them for them to make sense of their experience. And when they get to this new destination, they are often rejected, not accepted. So children feel rejected, feel a sense of not belonging. And that was also my experience and many of the experiences of my peers. We felt rejected. We felt this wasn't our home, but yet we couldn't go back to our home. So we felt very, very displaced. And that wasn't really taken into consideration within the education system as to how that then impacts our learning. Because the last thing that you want to focus on when you are in that experience is maths and science and all of those things, because you're still processing the emotional effects of the displacement that you have experienced.
Grammar. Do you want
Yes.
some water? If you have time, do you want to get a glass of water for yourself?
No, no, I'm fine. I'm fine.
Are you sure?
Yes, I'm fine. Thank you very much for asking. I'm fine.
But
I'm
now
fine.
we have the big question, because we know you have a PhD, you are a doctor. How from this subnormal, or I don't know, the subnormal school, you arrive to the top? I mean, not everybody has a PhD, not even me. What
Oh,
happened?
well, remember what I said, Naomi, about my grandmother.
Uh-huh.
She laid a foundation, and within Guyana, the culture within Guyana is one that highly values education, highly value education, to the extent that people would go without food in order to ensure that their children are educated, because there's a recognition that education, the right education, is a passport out of poverty. So the things that my grandmother instilled within me
Uh-huh.
laid the foundation that pointed me in the direction where I was going to go. So even though I had experienced these different pushbacks and setbacks, there was still something inside of me that had to come out. There was still something inside of me that had to be released. And so when I left school with very little qualification, that drive was still there. There was still a search for something deep and something more profound. And so I left school, went on to college to retake my school qualifications, and left college with a bit more qualifications. Then I went into the world of work, and I took advantage of an opportunity that came to me to study in night school, to get an opportunity to
So you had
uh,
both the work and the night school.
yes, sorry, it wasn't night school. The first time I tried to retake some examinations, I went to night school after I left
Uh-huh.
college.
Uh-huh.
But when I started to work, I got the opportunity to work and go to college at the same time, which I did for 2 years. And then I began to focus on self-development. Somebody had said to me one day in a training environment, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? Where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? I'd never thought about that. And I left that training session thinking about, okay, where do I want to see myself? Where do I see myself in 5 years' time? What do I want to do with my life?
Uh-huh.
And then I became a Christian, became involved within the church, and I was encouraged to study, read. And then I began to set up different projects using the knowledge and the skills that I had. But I always wanted to go to university, but I couldn't find the type of program that would be useful for me. Of course, I wanted to do a first degree, but I saw a master's degree being offered, and it was being offered in the same same building that I was sent to as a child to go and get extra training in practical skills. And then, so what happened was that I'd applied for this master's program, and I thought I would not be accepted on the master's program because I didn't have a degree. But at the interview, the program leader said to me, she said, I've got one question to ask you. I'm so curious. And I'm thinking, she's not going to let me go onto this program because I don't have a first degree. Instead, what she did, she turned around, she said, my question is, why aren't you teaching on this program? And I thought, wow, absolutely amazing. So there were a number of life skills that I had developed through my own training and going on different programs, having my own curriculum, my own life curriculum that I was following to develop myself.
Self-taught.
Very, very much self-taught. Now, one of the things which I need to say, because this is very important, my father, although he left us, he used to set us tasks to do, study tasks to do. So he would give us some lessons. He bought me a book. It was called You Go French in 6 months. And it says, teach yourself French. So I had to teach myself French. Yes, I had to teach myself French. And in this book, it had the pronunciation of the word. It had a correct spelling, but it also had the pronunciation of the words. My father said to me, I think you would be very good at speaking French. And he gave me a book. And he would set different tasks, but we also had to mark our own book. He didn't mark it, we had to mark our own book. But we learned to self-study, take responsibility and study for ourselves. So by the time I got to university, I was used to finding things out. I was used to going and doing research. I was used to doing it. And so I was at university for 2 years, completed my master's. And when I finished, I felt I wanted more. I wanted to study more. Where do I go to now? I thoroughly enjoy that. Some of my peers on the program felt, wow, we're just glad that these 2 years are over. Whereas I am now getting excited because I was in my mid-40s at that time. First time at university in my mid-40s, doing a master's, completed it, and I'm becoming so excited. Oh, this is what university is all about. Love it. And so my program leader said to me, well, I think you should go and do doctoral education. And so I made some inquiries about the different doctoral education program that was on. And I was thinking of doing something in personnel or management. And then I saw a doctorate in practical theology. And what that is all about, it's a multidisciplinary program that deals with practical issues. So that's just where the practical comes from, the practical needs, the practical problems, the practical issues from a theological standpoint. Right? So the practical issues could be anything from poverty to domestic violence to mental health, practical, but from a theological, reflecting on the problem from a theological standpoint. Now, what I was focusing on at that time was the education of the next generation of children. But I wanted to know, how did I make that journey from leaving school with very little qualification to be able to complete a PhD, a doctorate? Okay, so that was my research. My research was on my life journey. And when I look back, I saw the importance of my grandmother. Because scientists would tell us that those first 7 years of a child's life are foundational years. They set the pattern for up to, for us to build on. And one of my supervisors, he had said to me, he said, you must have been bright as a child. You must have been bright as a child. And I'm thinking, well, no, I've had to work my way through. He said, no. He said, the mere fact that you could be doing a doctorate now meant that you must have had it as a child. And I never thought about that. And I began to reflect and think about the fact that within children, there is that enormous potential just lying there, just waiting to come out, waiting for somebody to recognize that there's a spark of genius in them, and to be able to pull out those, the qualities, the gifts and talents that they have. So now I go back. So I've made the journey, and I go back looking for the next generation of doctors and professors and lawyers and educators who are in their infant form, who are in their childlike form. But the potential, the seed is inside of every single one of them, irrespective of their background, irrespective of their experiences, that they have that enormous potential.
So what will be, to close the first part, your message, how to have this seed to blossom? What will be your message to people?
Well, it goes back to something that you said. If you can't see it in yourself, you will not be able to see it in others. If you deny it in yourself, you will deny it in others. So it starts with ourselves. It starts with me. And I say to the children, look, I've got no scars. I haven't had a brain transplant. It's the same brain that I was born with, right? It's the same brain that I was born with. I just learned how to use it.
Wow. Thank you so much. And definitely we will do a second part to that.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much. And I think everybody watching that is going to reset their life and goals as well. And
Yes.
Everything is possible. You are the
Yep.
proof of it. Thank
Yep.
you so much. Please
Thank you.
keep in touch.
Thank you. Thank
So
you. Thank you
much.
very much. Thank you.